What's up everyone? I'm back again for another review, and this time I'm going to be talking about the newest Marvel movie, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Before I get started with my thoughts on this film, I figured I wanted to give some brief thoughts on the first Doctor Strange. I felt the first one was a pretty decent film from the MCU, by no means a masterpiece, and it had its shortcomings, but it was a decent introduction to one of the less popular Marvel characters at the time. If anything, it does deserve credit for that amazing trip out sequence with the character that's still one of my favorite moments from the entire MCU. I was kind of curious about the sequel, namely for one reason. While the original writers and directors were returning to this, they did end up getting a pretty decent replacement with Sam Raimi. I think most Marvel fans will definitely know him best for his own Spider-Man trilogy, which doesn't really need much of an introduction. So it was going to be pretty intriguing to see how his return to Marvel will pan out. Fortunately, in many ways, this is a really neat comeback for Sam Raimi. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is, for the most part, a decent take on an MCU film that does admittedly have its fair share of shortcomings that keep it from being great. Starting with the good, if there's anything I am definitely appreciating from the reception of this, it's that the biggest takeaway of this film is not so much the ties to the MCU, but more so the subtle nods to Raimi's own Evil Dead franchise. This film is less Sam Raimi's Spider-Man and more of a big tribute to the series that brought Sam Raimi on the map. And as a longtime Evil Dead fan, that was actually kinda awesome to see. Throughout a decent amount of the film, there's a lot of scenes that are structured very similarly to the Evil Dead franchise, as this is a Marvel movie that goes more as a horror film than anything else prior. If you're a fan like me, you'll notice some of the techniques Sam Raimi uses, from his strange angles, the constant camera movements, the zombie-like creatures, and even just the simple fact of seeing characters get the ever-loving shit beat out of them. There's a lot of fun creativity here when it comes to how this film managed to stand out from the MCU. Even in regards to characters, they're decent here. I enjoy seeing Stephen Strange having to struggle with making tough decisions and learning what he can do to make his situation better. And I enjoy how they executed Wanda as a villain here. Some aspects of her story feel a little excessive, yet the way they make her a threat makes it pretty fun to watch. It adds to Sam Raimi's sense of horror direction, as there's a lot of really cool action sequences that do get a lot more violent for MCU standards. I think some people are over-exaggerating a little with saying this movie deserves an R rating, however. I mean, yeah, it's more violent than the average MCU, but bruh, if you're talking PG-13 that should have been rated R, have you seen Raimi's own Drag Me to Hell? I love to see the same people who complain about this film for being too violent to witness the insane brutalness of that film. But that's a story for another day. So all in all, I really do dig what Doctor Strange 2 is as a Sam Raimi movie. Unfortunately though, that's only a decent part of it. As a multiverse movie, it's definitely not nearly as good as something like Everything Everywhere All at Once. Then again, I knew that going in, but even taking that out of it, it feels like there were some missed opportunities to what they can do with the concept of the multiverse. There are definitely some great ideas here. Like, I love the whole aspects of dreams being visions of other dimensions they toy around with here. That's something I honestly thought of myself, so to see that fully play out in a movie about the multiverse is actually pretty clever, and makes perfect sense. But in terms of set pieces of being a multiverse movie, it's kinda lacking. There's not as many cool trip out sequences compared to the incredible one in the first movie. Outside of one brief moment where they jump through dimensions that's visually cool, there's not as many opportunities to take advantage of these ideas here. The only major thing is some of the appearances of other characters from different dimensions, but even that feels kinda lacking. Sure, it's definitely cool to see some of these characters here, especially when one of them is a fairly iconic character, and the other is a really neat fan casting without giving it away. But in terms of story, their inclusion feels rather tacked on. Like they feel like they're here to set up more MCU related stuff and leave almost as soon as they come out. Not to mention, other characters' inclusions that aren't relative to big cameos in this film don't amount to much, with one of the characters just being kinda there more as a plot device, and a major setup from the first Doctor Strange with one character feeling kind of an afterthought. It makes for a narrative that doesn't always work. However, I can say that there's definitely a great Marvel movie around here somewhere. as I think the elements where it lacks in the multiverse department, it makes up for it by being a good tribute to the Evil Dead films. It's a flawed movie that I ultimately enjoy for the aspects that really made it a fun time thanks to Sam Raimi's direction. I do recommend checking out Everything Everywhere All at Once more, for sure, but this movie is certainly worth the watch. And while you're at it, if you haven't seen them before watching this film, check out the Evil Dead movies to see what Sam Raimi can really do with full control. Here's hoping the next time Sam Raimi makes a Marvel movie, he can have more creative freedom. But as of now, it's just a great little reminder of what this dude can do as a director in the horror genre. So take that for what it's worth. And I'm going to give Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness a 7 out of 10. It's decent. I recommend checking it out. And I'll see you guys again in the near future. Later, guys.
Hey, I'll swallow your soul. I'll swallow your soul. I'll swallow your soul.
Swallow this.